Zoom's founder left Cisco to build the video empire, 16B SUS. In 2011, Eric Yuan was living the American dream. The Chinese immigrant had climbed his way to become a vice president of engineering at Cisco, one of the world's most powerful tech companies, earning a seven-figure salary and managing WebEx, their flagship video conferencing product. But Yuan had a problem that kept him awake at night. Every time he used WebEx for a video call, he cringed. The software was clunky, unreliable, and crashed constantly. Users complained endlessly about frozen screens, dropped calls, and audio delays that made conversations feel like bad satellite TV interviews from the 1980s. Yuan knew that if video calling was going to be the future of business communication, it had to actually work. When he pitched his vision for a complete rebuild of WebEx to make it simple, reliable, and joyful to use, Cisco's executives looked at him like he'd suggested they start selling ice cream instead of routers. They were making hundreds of millions from WebEx subscriptions. Why fix what wasn't broken from a revenue perspective? But Yuan saw something they didn't. He saw a world where video calls would be as natural as phone calls, where grandparents could effortlessly chat with grandchildren, where global teams could collaborate as if they were in the same room. That vision was so powerful that Yuan made one of the most expensive career decisions in Silicon Valley history. He quit his executive position, walked away from millions in stock options, and started over from zero to build what would become Zoom. Eric Yuan's journey to Silicon Valley royalty began in the most unlikely place imaginable. Born in 1970 in Tai'an, a small city in China's Shandong province, Yuan grew up during China's economic transformation, but long before the country became a tech powerhouse. His first encounter with the power of communication technology wasn't through computers or smartphones, but through a 400-mile train ride to visit his girlfriend, who later became his wife. The journey took 10 grueling hours each way, and Yuan made this trek repeatedly during college. Sitting on those hard train seats, watching the Chinese countryside roll by at what felt like a snail's pace, Yuan dreamed of a world where distance didn't matter. He imagined being able to see and talk to anyone, anywhere, instantly. This wasn't just romantic wishful thinking from a lovesick college student. It was the seed of an idea that would eventually be worth $16 billion. Yuan studied applied mathematics and computer science at Shandong University of Science and Technology, but his real education came from those endless train rides, thinking about how technology could collapse distance and bring people together. The path from rural China to Silicon Valley wasn't a straight line for Yuan. After graduating in 1994, he tried 8 times to get a visa to come to the United States. 8 rejections from the US Embassy, 8 dreams deferred. But Yuan had inherited something powerful from his upbringing in China during its rapid modernization, an unshakable belief that persistence beats talent, luck, and connections. On his 9th attempt in 1997, he finally received approval to enter the United States. He arrived in Silicon Valley with minimal English, $2,000 in his pocket, and an obsession with video communication that his new American colleagues thought was premature and impractical. The internet was still dial-up for most people. Streaming a video took hours. The idea that people would regularly make video calls seemed like science fiction. But Yuan had spent those train rides in China visualizing the future, and he was willing to wait for technology to catch up to his vision. Yuan's first job in America was at WebEx, a tiny startup founded by Minju that was trying to solve the problem of web-based conferencing. In 1997, WebEx had fewer than 10 employees and a product that barely worked, but Yuan saw the potential immediately. This was his chance to build the communication technology he'd dreamed about on those Chinese train rides. He became employee number 8, working as a software engineer for $40,000 a year, a fraction of what he might have earned back in China's booming tech sector. But Yuan wasn't there for the money. He was there to learn how to build video communication software that could handle the technical challenges that made most video calls look like choppy flipbook animations. For the next 14 years, Yuan poured his obsessive attention to detail into making WebEx work. He led the engineering teams that turned a glitchy startup product into enterprise software used by millions of professionals worldwide. When Cisco acquired WebEx in 2007 for $3.2 billion, Yuan suddenly found himself a wealthy executive at one of the most powerful companies in tech. The immigrant who'd been rejected for visas 8 times was now a Silicon Valley success story.
But success at Cisco became a prison for Yuan's bigger ambitions. As vice president of engineering, he was responsible for WebEx's technical development, but he was also constrained by corporate bureaucracy, legacy code, and a business model that prioritized enterprise sales over user experience. Yuan watched as WebEx became more feature bloated and complicated with each update. The software that was supposed to make communication effortless required IT departments, training sessions, and technical support just to join a simple video call. Yuan's team would spend months developing improvements, only to have them delayed or watered down by committee decisions and compatibility requirements. Meanwhile, Yuan was getting feedback from users that broke his heart. People hated using WebEx. They dreaded video calls because the software was so unreliable. Technical problems were ruining important business meetings, job interviews, and family conversations. Yuan realized that WebEx had solved the technical challenge of transmitting video over the internet, but it had failed at the more important challenge of making that experience human and natural. In 2010, Yuan made a proposal that would have transformed WebEx and potentially changed the trajectory of video communication technology. He presented a detailed plan to Cisco's leadership for rebuilding WebEx from the ground up with a focus on simplicity, reliability, and mobile compatibility. Yuan's vision was radical for its time. Video calls should work on any device, require no training or setup, and be so reliable that technical problems became rare exceptions rather than daily frustrations. He wanted to create software that his grandmother could use without help, that worked equally well on smartphones and conference room systems, that made video calls feel as natural and reliable as phone calls had become decades earlier. The technology existed to build this software in 2010, but it would require abandoning WebEx's existing codebase and starting over. It would mean cannibalizing a product that was generating hundreds of millions in annual revenue for Cisco. Yuan's presentation was technically brilliant, strategically sound, and commercially realistic. Cisco's executives said no. The rejection of Yuan's WebEx rebuild proposal became the moment that launched Zoom. Yuan realized that he had two choices: accept that video communication would remain clunky and frustrating for another decade, or leave behind his comfortable executive salary to build the software he knew was possible. In June 2011, at age 41, Yuan submitted his resignation to Cisco. He walked away from stock options worth millions of dollars, a prestigious title, and the security of working for one of the most stable companies in tech. His former colleagues thought he was insane. Why would anyone leave a VP position at Cisco to start another video conferencing company? The market was crowded with established players like Skype, GoToMeeting, and WebEx itself. Video calling seemed like a solved problem that didn't need another solution. But Yuan understood something that the market had missed. Video calling wasn't a solved problem. It was a problem that had been abandoned halfway through the solution. The existing software worked well enough for early adopters and tech-savvy users, but it was far from the seamless, reliable experience that would make video calls mainstream.
Yuan's approach to building Zoom was shaped by his 14 years of frustration with WebEx's limitations. Instead of starting with features and adding reliability later, he started with reliability and built features on top of an unshakable foundation. Yuan and his initial team of 40 engineers, many of whom he recruited from Cisco and WebEx, spent 2 years in what he called stealth mode, obsessively testing and retesting every component of their video calling software. They didn't launch a beta version or seek publicity. They just built and tested until they had software that worked consistently across different devices, internet connections, and usage scenarios. Yuan's engineering philosophy was simple but revolutionary. If a feature couldn't work reliably for a grandmother using an old laptop on slow Wi-Fi, then it wasn't ready for release. This meant that Zoom's initial feature set was smaller than competitors, but every feature that existed worked exactly as users expected it to work. When Zoom launched publicly in January 2013, the video calling market barely noticed. TechCrunch's launch coverage was a brief, skeptical article questioning whether the world needed another video conferencing tool. Skype had hundreds of millions of users, WebEx dominated enterprise sales, Google was preparing to launch Hangouts. Into this crowded market came Zoom, a company with no marketing budget, no brand recognition, and a product that looked deceptively simple compared to feature-rich competitors. But Yuan had learned something crucial from his train rides in China and his years at WebEx. The best technology isn't the most advanced technology, it's the most reliable technology. Zoom's competitive advantage wasn't superior features or lower prices. It was the radical concept that video calls should work every time, without technical problems, setup requirements, or user frustration. The early adoption of Zoom revealed Yuan's genius for understanding user psychology. While competitors focused on selling to IT departments and enterprise decision makers, Yuan built Zoom for the actual humans who would use the software. Zoom calls started instantly with a single click. The interface was so simple that users could focus on their conversations rather than managing the software. Most importantly, Zoom calls rarely failed. When other video calling platforms were experiencing crashes, frozen screens, and audio delays, Zoom calls just worked. This reliability created a word-of-mouth marketing effect that no advertising budget could have purchased. People started requesting Zoom for important calls because they trusted it to work when it mattered. Business meetings moved to Zoom because participants knew they wouldn't waste time troubleshooting technical problems. Remote workers adopted Zoom because they could rely on it for daily team communication. By 2019, Zoom had grown from Yuan's frustrated vision into a publicly traded company worth $23 billion. The platform was hosting billions of meeting minutes annually, serving everyone from Fortune 500 companies to elementary school classrooms. But the real test of Yuan's decade-long bet on video communication reliability came in March 2020, when the COVID-19 pandemic suddenly made video calls essential infrastructure for the global economy. As countries locked down and businesses shifted to remote work virtually overnight, video calling platforms faced unprecedented demand. Skype crashed regularly under the load. WebEx struggled with capacity limitations. Google Meet scrambled to add features for business users. But Zoom, built from the ground up for reliability and scalability, handled the demand surge that increased their daily users from 10 million to 300 million in just 4 months. The pandemic vindicated every decision Yuan had made since leaving Cisco. His obsession with reliability became the foundation that supported remote work, distance learning, and social connection during global isolation. Zoom became the platform that powered virtual graduations, remote job interviews, online classes, and family gatherings during lockdowns. The software that Yuan's former colleagues at Cisco had considered unnecessary became essential infrastructure for maintaining human connection during a global crisis. By October 2020, Zoom's market capitalization peaked at over $160 billion, making it more valuable than Boeing, FedEx, or American Express. Yuan's personal stake in the company was worth over $11 billion, but more importantly for the engineer who'd spent those long train rides dreaming about effortless communication, Zoom had become the video calling platform he'd always envisioned. Yuan's journey from frustrated Cisco executive to billionaire founder illustrates the power of technical vision combined with stubborn persistence. He didn't invent video calling or discover new technology. Instead, he recognized that existing solutions were settling for good enough when users deserved software that actually worked reliably. His willingness to walk away from financial security at Cisco to build better software created a company that redefined how humans communicate across distances. Today, Zoom call has become as common a phrase as phone call was for previous generations. The platform processes billions of meeting minutes annually, supports remote work for millions of professionals, and enables personal connections that span continents and time zones. Eric Yuan's empire was built on a simple but powerful insight. Technology should serve human needs so seamlessly that users forget the technology exists. That insight, born during train rides in rural China and refined through years of Silicon Valley engineering, created one of the most valuable and essential software platforms in the world.